Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, I declare the plenary session of the Fishery Forum open. Smart fishing, research, catching and process. Invited are Mr. Oleg Kobikov, Director of the Liaison Office of the FAO, Ms. Kadantsova, CEO of the MD Insight, official partner of Alibaba, Vasily Svetlov from Sberbank, Mr. Alfred Tulinius, Chairman, Nordic Rus, Rosselscho's Bank representative, Vladimir Solodov, the governor of Kamchatka, Mr. Viktor Yevtukhov, Secretary of State and Deputy Minister of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation, Mr. Ilya Shestakov, the Federal Agency for Fisheries head, and we will have Mr. Fan Xubing, Managing Director of the Beijing Sea Bridge Marketing and Consulting. And the floor for the welcome address is given to the Minister of Agriculture of the Russian Federation, Mr. Dmitry Patrushev. Esteemed participants and guests of the plenary session, I am happy to welcome you to the 5th Fishery Forum and Seafood Exhibition. And the forum, the event, is well tested, and it has indicated how important it is for the fishery industry in Russia and abroad. We have 10,000 participants from 40 countries. I would like to welcome the heads of the agencies that are responsible for the development of industry from Argentina, Senegal, Abkhazia, Belarus, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, and Myanmar. And we have an opportunity to talk about all the issues of development of the industry in the current geopolitical situation. Today, the world economy faces a great transformation affecting all the industries and the fishery industry as well. The violation of the processes of catching and processing affect the transportation chains. All this affects the prices, and in the long run, it affects the availability, access to the fish products. Fish was always highly in demand, and for many countries, it is historically the most accessible source of protein. And with every passing year, the issues of ecology and fighting illegal catching and restoration of the stock is high on the agenda. It is necessary to find a well-balanced approach to these issues. For us, a key goal is long-term and efficient use of bioresources, taking into consideration the environmental constraints. The fleet is being upgraded, and there is high liability for poaching. The technologies of growing fish and their processing are being developed as well. These are the tasks that every nation faces, and all the participants understand that the approaches and the efforts should be concerted based on international dialogue, digital technologies, and scientific developments. That's why smart industry is the key topic of the 5th forum. And I suggest that we should discuss what the smart industry should include, what decisions should be taken, what solutions should be found for the further development of the industry. I would like to present the information on the state of the industry and the task that the industry is facing. The state is giving a systemic approach to the industry, and some 12 billion rubles will be allocated in the near future, and we also tend to the industry science. There will be budget allocations for the construction of the research vessels. Two are being constructed now, and mid-term it would enable us to increase the accuracy of the forecasting. And our major project on the development of the agricultural sector also includes the measures to develop the fishery industry. And some of the measures were proposed by the participants of the market. One is providing subsidies to process pollock and its transportation from the Far East. 127,000 tons of products have been hauled already. And in 2022, a decision was taken by the government to support the fishermen that are harvesting fish in the Azov Sea. Some compensation of the operational expenditures will be provided. As soon as the money is allocated, we will immediately send it to the region. The systemic approach by the state enables the fishery industry in Russia to maintain stable economic and production indicators. In 2021, the turnover of the industry has grown by 16% to 8 billion rubles, and the profits has increased by 70%, and it is 196 billion rubles. The dynamics of the first 6 months make it possible to believe that we will maintain the indicators as they were in 2021. The investments are growing, and at the moment, 300 billions have been invested into the fleet. It is not only building vessels in the shipyards. What is important that the new vessels increase the efficiency of harvesting fish, and of course they meet the environmental requirements. The customers received the first 10 vessels, and 21 processing plants have been built, 96 ships and 6 plants will be built in the near future. New investments will be made to contribute to the production increase and environment protection. Now talking about the production. In 2021, the catch increase exceeded 5 million tons, and in 2022, the catch will be similar. The aquaculture is developing 350 million tons last year. We expect an increase of between 3 and 5%. All these is in conformity with the plans to develop the agro-industrial complex and fishery industry. So the internal market, the domestic market, will be supplied with the necessary fish products. We will be also able to develop the export capacity of this country. Despite the sanctions and unfriendly activity of some countries, Russia continues the external trade with the food products, and we exported food products, fish or aquatic food products to 58 last year and 60 this year, and it is more than 1.1 million tons. So this country once again proved it being a responsible partner for foreign partners, and we count on mutual equitable dialogue. The participants have described the current situation. At the same time, new realities pose new challenges to provide availability of the products for the population. It is necessary to arrange import substitutions in the areas where we do not cover our own opportunities. It is the equipment for the fleet and the components of the aquaculture. You realize, you know that in 2022 some partners do not fulfill the contracts to supply high-tech equipment. Some countries stopped supplying forage and seed materials, and it was not that easy to re-engineer our work, but I think altogether we did manage to overcome the difficulties. However, the experience has shown that it is necessary to localize the production of the equipment, so to support the fishery shipbuilding, 7 billion rubles have been allocated for the equipment projects, and the batch production of the equipment will be started, as well as the components for the fleet. As far as feed substitution is concerned, the government will provide compensations for the overheads of construction of the facilities, and the government has set a task for the stakeholders to provide the state-of-the-art recipe, and the roadmap has been developed to start the substitution. Within the 5 years, the Russian Federation will have 5 facilities launched to produce forage and with high capacity, and by 2030 we will have all the necessary capacity to produce forage. Another priority is logistics. Currently, we have taken immediate measures, and I've mentioned some already, and statistically, the industry is functioning without any disruption. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the participants of the industry for their professionalism and enthusiasm. At the same time, the re-engineering, the logistics chains needs a strategic approach with the improved state support and also alternating the channels of supply. The North Sea route should be used as a transportation corridor, and this route will be used systematically to reduce the expenses for haulage of fish from the Far East to the central part of Russia. And we expect to see the tangible results next year. Dear participants, colleagues, in conclusion, I would like to state that we will keep supporting the industry, developing new projects, and accessing new markets. I would like to emphasize how significant these events are, like the Global Fishery Forum, which can bring together the stakeholders and to operationally timely find solution for the difficulties. I am sure that both the plenary session and the business agenda of the forum will find solution for the most burning issues. I would like to thank you for your readiness to work, and I would like to thank our foreign partners and friends for understanding of how important the global dialogue is. I wish success to the forum and the exhibition. Thank you. The floor for the welcome address is given to the head of the Federal Agency for Fisheries, Mr. Ilya Shostakov, on behalf of Ms. Matviyenko, the chairperson of the Senate. To the organizers and the participants of the forum, on behalf of the Council of Federation of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, and on my behalf, I would like to thank the participants of the 5th Forum and exhibition. One of the most important tasks that the fishery industry of the Russian Federation is facing is supplying high-quality and accessible fish products. It is necessary to set conditions for the further development of the industry and make use its high capacity to provide food and economic security of the country. It is necessary to unite the efforts of business and science and practitioners to increase the catch and process the bioresources, development of the aquaculture and improvement of the living conditions of the fishes. The forum is an authoritative site to discuss the techniques and ways of the development of the fishery industry. And I'm sure that the participation in the forum and the visit to the exhibition will make it possible to master the new methods in the industry. And I wish the organizers and participants of the forum successful and fruitful work, good health and well-being. The head of the Council of Federation of the Federal Assembly, Ms. Matviyenko. Signed. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Let us start the plenary session per se, and we have quite a representative panel. We have changed the format a bit. It will be my first experience of that kind. I will be moderating the session, and I will try to make this session interesting for everyone. As it was noted, the major topic is smart fishing and all the components of it. We will discuss the latest trend in the industry, new approaches in the development of the stock. We will talk about the logistics change, the new technologies of sales, and of course the state of the finance in the industry. The FAO has issued a report on the state of fishery and aquaculture, and I would like to give floor to Mr. Oleg Kobykov. He is from the liaison office of FAO.
Thank you, Ilya Vasilievich. Dear participants, Mr. Patrushev, dear colleagues, I'd like to welcome the participants of the Fishery Forum on behalf of Mr. Deng Xingguo, the General Director of FAO, and this is the fifth time that FAO is participating in fishery forums, and it is our way to honor the role that the Russian Federation is playing on the global arena, and it demonstrates the close interaction that we have between Russia and our organization. And of course, every 2 years, we issue the report dedicated to the issues of global fishery, and this year the topic is the blue transformation, and it is about the gradual development of the fishery sector in order for it to contribute greatly into the feeding of all the population. And we will have 9 billion people. Billion. Now we are close to the figure of 8 billion, and the demographic specialists say that we'll reach 9 billion quite soon, and we need to enhance the capacities of agricultural sector, and we see good news, and it is nice to see that against the backdrop of difficult geopolitical situations, and there was a slowdown, but we successfully have overcome those barriers, and we have set the record high indicators this year. And the latest figures we have from 2020 for the production and the overall turnover, and 214 million tons This is the number that we have, and aquaculture is continuously growing. And we expect that in 2023, 2024, we will have even larger figures, and then aquaculture will be growing even faster. And here on this slide, you can see the dynamics of the growth in the volume of the production of aquaculture. I'd like to draw your attention to the following thing in this industry. We see that the algae is growing in its volume overall. And the next slide, you can see the figures of the consumption of fish products, and this year it amounted to more than 20 kilos per person, and it is in compliance with the recommendations and guidelines from WHO, and Russia is in line with other states, though we have various statistical data, and we have not used all the potential, all the resources that we have, and we expect that this share will be growing 20 kilos per person. This is an average indicator. Of course, we understand that in developed countries, in some countries with exquisite resources, this figure should be even larger. And here we can see how aquaculture is developing right now in many countries and various continents. Over the last decades, Asia has demonstrated significant growth, and now they have reached a large share in global consumption. China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Thailand. Now this growth is slowing down, but now we see the growth in African countries, and Russia is also trying to develop this industry of aquaculture, and we have to catch up with those countries. The next slide, please. The role of the sector in global economy, the employment and the income. This is what the picture looks like. 600 million people depend on the fish sector, and only 1/10 has been employed in the fish production. So 600 million people. It is each 1/12 of the overall population is dependent on that. The next slide. Here you can see some figures of overall contribution of the fishing industry into GDP. And the trade that we see here, 225 states are engaged in this trade. The next slide, please. The professionals of this industry understand that fish resources are exploited quite extensively, and we see that there is an overcatching, though in FAO, in our report, we see a number of positive trends. The next slide. So we see that the share of sustainable catch is growing, and unsustainable ones are slowing down. And over these days at the forum, we will discuss the measures, the efficient measures that have been taken to counteract the illegal catching. And our task is to contribute into ensuring food safety and security. And the last years, the pandemic, the disruption of logistical chains have demonstrated that we need to structure our systems more efficiently in our industry. The dynamics of the growth of fishing and aquaculture, this diagram illustrates it quite well. The trends over the last years, the growing rates And this is what we have to adapt to, in particular for Russia. We are taking efficient measures to stimulate the development of this sector and this industry, and it will have a positive impact on the regional, national economy, the economy of regions, and also improving the well-being and living standards of people. Our report is dedicated to the topic of blue transformation. It has been translated into Russian, and you can look it up. I will not go deep into detail here. And the next slide. The next one. So here we see the FAO forecast for the dynamics of growth per capita, the consumption of fish products per capita, and if we ensure the compliance with the tasks, the sustainable use of natural resources of the world, ocean, the growth of aquaculture, and the improvement of the industrial systems, we will be able to increase the consumption by 2050 to 25 kilos per person per capita, and also it's about the nutrients and the protein and other microelements will be growing. The next slide, I'd like to remind you that the General Assembly of the UN has declared this year the year of small-scale fishing, and I'd like to invite you to visit our stand and our session that will take place in at 1 o'clock on Friday. Thank you. Mr. Kabikov, I have a question about what you said in your report, and you said that the aquaculture share is growing and the fish production is decreasing, and we understand that as for the saturation and availability of fish products on the market, how do you evaluate it? What does FAO think about that, taking into consideration the growing volume of aquaculture production? Thank you, Ilya Vasilievich. This question seems quite simple, but there is no simple answer to that because the dynamics of the market is different in various countries. There are some developed countries with certain rates of consumption and emerging countries that are aimed more at the export of production, if we take these dynamics into consideration. And there are also countries with insufficient consumption and insufficient import of fish products, and they lack the resources. In FAO, we have a global fish program where we are tracking the dynamics of the global market for specific categories of fish products. Twice a year, we issue a report. At our stand, we have all the materials, and you can use a QR code to read them. Overall, the forecast for fish product market is quite positive. The demand is growing. The supply is growing as well, and that gives countries that have a significant share on this market to increase their income in future and increase this share. But I'd like to note that the competition is quite high, especially for aquaculture production. We translated our materials this year into Russian. And it is the report dedicated to the growth of the Chinese market. And we have to be active. We have to invest into this sector. And Russia is doing that, is investing into shipbuilding in order to strengthen their position on this market for the interests of our population and global population as well. Thank you. Thank you. And let's move on. And as you know, fishing plays a very important part for coastal regions of our country, and regions are interacting quite closely with the businesses, with companies. And now I'd like to give floor to Mr. Vladimir Solodov, governor of Kamchatka, which is the leader in Russia in this regard. I'd like to welcome all of you here, and I'm glad that we are discussing such a relevant topic and that the heads of the ministries and the Minister of Agriculture is paying special attention to that. I think it's a very important signal that those trends that were mentioned by Mr. Kobikov actively utilized, and we are trying to invest into that. And it is a very extensive topic, but I'd like to touch upon two priorities and to focus on them in my brief speech. I will use the well-known formula, urbi et urbi, for a city and for the world. What fishery complex gives to our fishing regions, what it gives to the country and globally to the world in order to ensure food safety and security. Of course, the priority of such regions as Kamchatka, where fishing industry is the basic one, we need to get better economic indicators because it is a very important contribution into the overall well-being. A lot has been already done, and we have set new tasks that will enable us to put that into practice. This is about the fair use of bioresources, the allocations that we see in the budgets, and also the investment, what has been mentioned by Mr. Patrushev. And I'd like to emphasize that currently we see a significant positive growth in terms of the growth of investment. And I will give you some figures from Kamchatka investment quarters, 63 million rubles and have been invested, and 7 out of 8 plants have been constructed, and a lot of new jobs were created in this sector, and it allowed us to improve the quality of our work. Also, here, when we are going through the transitional period to the second stage of investment quarters, I think that we should pay special attention to specific features of this mechanism so that we do not make some mistakes that can be committed there. We have to be quite attentive towards the use of fish resources. It's about pollock, it's about crabs, and some other types of seafood, and we have to take that into consideration. I'd like to draw your attention also to another aspect. We have extensively discussed that as well, and we have come to a consensus. We have to be quite attentive towards investment in terms of its economic efficiency. In fishing regions, we see that the coastal processing plays even more important part. We see there a larger percentage of the taxes that are paid, and it opens new opportunities under the volatile changing conditions of the market. Specifically, I'd like to draw your attention to the need of the preservation of SMEs and the development of small and medium-sized enterprises, because when we are building up the investment capacities, we are upgrading the fleet. It may not lead to the larger flexibility of SMEs, and they do play a very important part in this process. I think it is crucially important for us, viewing this positive trend, to come to a more systemic approach. We have to take into consideration the already accumulated volume of investment. Probably we should introduce some new investment mechanism so that we can record and see the part that is contributed by each stakeholder. And we should come from specific items and specific objects to larger clusters. clusters. We have seen that in Kamchatka. Last week, we commissioned a Commodore plant on the western coast of Kamchatka, and we see that this facility will not only manufacture high-quality production, but also they will be cooperating in processing the waste from other facilities. Only a half will be dedicated to their own feedstock. And what does it give to the whole cluster? What does it give to the settlement? It gives a synergy effect, and it is not the only example. Nariba Group company on Kamchatka, they are engaged in ship repair, in different types of logistical services. I'd like to emphasize that it is very important to plan the engagement of various stakeholders in fish production, in fish processing, in this investment process. Another aspect I'd like to mention when we talk about availability of fish products and also the efficiency of fish production, it is very important to track each stage of the overall process, and part of those stages are quite up to date, and they are quite actively developed, but there are still some gaps and some disruptions up to the point when it comes to the end user, and we see some volatility in prices and also counterfeit production and overall insufficient efficiency. So in future, I think that we need to adopt a systemic approach for each segment. I'd like also to note that with deep processing and the production of the end product, this is important. Probably you've seen on the stands the examples of these products that already exist on the market. And this is what should stimulate our growth and also the emergence of these end products and their development of the market. And the last bullet point, it is the most important one, what I wanted to emphasize under the conditions of the current geopolitical situations and the events that are happening right now, it is becoming even more important. We have to set the priority for covering the needs of our domestic market. And we discussed with experts that we can increase 2 times the consumption of fish products. Probably this is their conservative forecast, but we need to do that, and we need to join our efforts. The figures that have been given, the global figures, we can catch up with those indicators if we put into practice this state program for the consumption of high-quality fish products. We can organize awareness campaigns, information campaigns in schools, in various types of chains, what has been mentioned in the welcome address, because it is of paramount importance for the overall stability of the market, both for manufacturers and also the successful end result for our citizens. I think that we should focus on that, and with the support of the United Russia Party, we plan to do this work. We will be promoting all those trends, and in the framework of the forum, I'd like to ask you to pay special attention to that, and we as large manufacturers can contribute to that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and you have used such an interesting term. I know you have requested to be excused, and still, Vladimir, I would like you to answer one question. And the situation you have mentioned, it's about the fall of the production, but the question is about a different thing. We will be discussing the second stage of the investment quotas and the issue that the governors are raising. The companies will be leaving their region, and the taxes paid to the region budget will be less, and that's a concern. There is a development of trans-regional companies in Russia. It is a consolidation of the resources, and the situation is inevitable in this respect. What role will the regions play in the future to regulate the industry, and what measures should be taken by the regions to attract the companies to their region? That's an important question, and it is the main when we design the second stage of the investment quotas, how to unite how to combine the process of consolidation the industry and to bring in the higher standards of productivity and consumption and preservation of the ecosystem of the small businesses. Preservation of small businesses is important, and you have to agree to me that small businesses in the industry is a synonym pretty often to poaching. This attitude is changing, of course, as a result of the control and oversight, but we should preserve the network of the small companies that will be using the unique resources, producing high quality and product that will be based on the scientific research, and at the same time they will be responsible for the employment of the population in the fishermen villages. So talking about the role of the regions, I think the key responsibility is working as a team, because my role or our role as a region is to set up conditions and set up the sites for the investment quotas and to ensure balance between the volume of the production, between the missing or lapses of the elements that are not there, and the localization of the quotas that are being formed at the federal level. We will be able to unify all these processes at the regional level. Something I would like to clear up. Some time ago, one of the largest companies came to Kamchatka and started developing over there. So the question, are you planning as a region to lure companies to come to Kamchatka? Yes, we would. It won't be only luring the companies, but it will be one of the requirements. If a quota is received in a certain water area, the companies should oblige to register a subsidiary in the region that is nearest to the water area to process the catch. Okay, unfortunately, there is a position of the antitrust agency that they say that is not possible. Well, you want to turn it into an obligation. Well, but you should provide incentives. When incentives are not possible without obligations. So when we are talking about stage 2 of the investment quotas, many stakeholders believe that it is too premature to start it because it is not possible to have the lessons learned from stage 1. And the construction of new processing bases, factory ships is very important, and I would like to give floor to Mr. Yevtukhov to deliberate on that. Deputy Minister of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation. First of all, I would like to emphasize how impressed I am from this forum. It is my first time at the forum, and if I would come here without knowing what it is, I would think that it is the scope of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, because a lot of interesting stands and a lot of interesting proposals. Everything is well organized and managed, and of course, great solutions could be found, and partners could be found at such a happening. Now, as far as shipbuilding is concerned, and I do not want to be the captain of this and things, and we face the challenge of providing the substitution for the equipment, and if the situation is easier with the passenger fleet and the localization in this segment is higher, then the fishery fleet situation is not that simple and easy. We should have to state that. At the same time, we have a desire and opportunities to address this challenge, and indeed the decision was taken for the objective reasons to make it obligatory for the companies that are the customers to build the ships and to use quotas. And when we talk about what was the root cause for that and why shipbuilders find it impossible to replace, to substitute the equipment, we cannot complain about the customers, about the clients, because all the fishing companies have fulfilled their obligations before that they have for the shipbuilding yards. They pay the money, they fulfill their contractual obligations, but at the same time, we still have to understand that the situation has changed, and it is necessary to find a way out of the difficulties of the situation by localizing the equipment that until now we have not been manufacturing in this country. And money has been allocated, something that Dmitry Patrushev has mentioned. The first 7 billion rubles have been allocated, and the R&D work for the critical items of the import for more than 20 billion rubles are being planned, and we understand that the companies that will be willing to work in these countries are just standing by at they are just ready for the invitation of the tenders, and I think we will manage this situation. Another way out is cooperating with our partners from friendly countries, primarily from China. However, we see that there are more countries that maintain partnership relations with us. However, they're not quite steady. We can see that there are problems with allowing the passage of the freight in some countries and refusal to accept mere bank cards. These are the hiccups, and we have a Russia Technological Agency, and many companies receive grants from the agency, and the work is ongoing to do the reverse engineering and to start producing equipment not only in the shipbuilding industry but in the others. It stands to reasons. Many are aware that we have 117 shipping vessels, 105 for quotas, 69 are being constructed. Some are at the stage of making contracts for them. What was another challenge what was another issue that we faced? I do not want to complain about anyone. The fishing companies were continuous in their efforts, and many were interested in getting the high tech, the state of the art, using the high tech and the state of the art from abroad. And unfortunately, motors, fish processing, propulsion system refused, like Finland, Germany, Japan, Norway, Denmark refused. Some scrapped, and they refused to supply the equipment. Some are trying to find the possibilities to circumvent the sanctions and supply the equipment. But not all the companies from abroad are willing to continue cooperation with us. And I would like to remind you that we had 3 dozens of projects engaged in the design and engineering. And though there were manufacturers from Russia involved, not only works or winches, but those designers, they gave preference to the foreign manufacturers. And that's why now, to replace the manufacturers, to find new manufacturers for the equipment, we will need some time, and we will have to redesign and re-engineer the projects. But still, we will have to do it. We have a joint working group, task force, and we had a discussion with Vladimir, with the clients' representatives and the shipyards present, and we have instilled it on the shipyards that they will have to fulfill their obligations. But still, when the contracts were placed in 2018, for fishing vessels and for crab vessels in 2020, the client, it was a client customer market, and the shipyards were fighting for these contracts. And sometimes even the conditions were not favorable for them. And though these shipyards are participating in the state orders and as a matter of principles, they could compete for better conditions. But the task is diversification of the activity of the shipyards, and orders are important to modernize the shipyards, to provide, to pay wages to their workers, to their employees. And that's why re-engineering will have to be done. And some big money will be needed for that. Another question is where should the money be drawn, and how we should negotiate things with the clients, with the customers, with the fishing companies. What would I like you to call you all the stakeholders? We should come to terms, and because right now, getting engaged in some litigation and taking the matter to court in no good. You need vessels. If you do not have vessels, you will show red. You won't be able to address, you won't be able to solve the problems you're facing. Of course, you can take the shipyards to court, but it's not the best way out. As far as the government is concerned, we will be pushing the shipyards to fulfill the obligations, for the shipyards to fulfill the obligations as soon as possible. But we cannot do without re-engineering and redesign, and as a result, the projects will be out of budget and out of schedule, and And there is a guidance to conclude the contracts only based on the expert review, and there will be amendments into the law on the industrial policy, and it will be the customers that will be responsible for the expert review as a result of the federal laws, and it will be just the foundation, the basis for receiving budget financing. So altogether, through concerted efforts, we should find the solution. We do have the possibilities for providing subsidies for fishing vessels and for crab vessels. We have subsidies of 20% for crab vessels, and grants are provided, and we provide subsidies for leasing, for loans, and as far as small and mid tonnage, we can provide subsidies for the 30% of capex, and of course we will prolong this work, and the measures will be extended to the other years in the future. And we have a research institute, and the design institute analyzed and made a research of the equipment for the customers that are placing orders for the vessels. And the Russian equipment includes a few thousand of positions. You can take your pick, and it's an information both for the customers and for the design teams. And in the future, when stage 2 is kicked off, we should transfer to the production of large batches of the ships, small and mid equipment, and we should select the projects, and based on those projects, we should turn these projects into batches, thus building the vessels at the costs that would suit the customers. And to re-emphasize what Mr. Soladov stated from Kamchatka, it's about the factory ships and factories that have received state support as part of the quotas. It is the processing factories. 21 factory has been built already in Murmansk, in the Far East, at Kamchatka, and the situation is much better. One of the facilities that was built in Kamchatka has 80% of the domestic Russian equipment, and it is the equipment to process the raw materials and also canning equipment as well. So we do have successful projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mr. Yevtukhov, because when he has come to us, the rhetoric has changed in terms of the interaction with the stakeholders, the representatives of the fish production. We were accused of not doing things right, but now we have come to the status quo, and we can work jointly and resolve those issues that need to be resolved. And the representative of Sberbank has listened attentively to what we were discussing. The structure is such as if the vessel is not built, then the claim is filed, and Sberbank has given the loan, and then it can fall apart. But I'd like to ask you another question. You say that the Ministry of Industry and Trade, when we come to the second stage of investment quarters, there will be a requirement for the serial numbers of vessels, and it is about a number of projects that you would like to include into the decree. What will be possible for construction? The first question, where can we take those projects from? Because normally private companies own them. And another question is about some additional requirements on the part of the Ministry of Industry and Trade that they can have at the second stage. Well, as for the projects, I think that we should determine them jointly with you. We have participants that are companies, private companies, and there were several proposals that have been put forward and submitted. And I've mentioned that before. Everybody understands that we will have to redesign some vessels, taking into consideration new conditions and new equipment. And also it is about the use of engines, our Russian ones and Chinese ones with the small tonnage vessels. We could have done that from the very start with our own engines, and we understand that there will be problems with getting engines with a larger capacity, and we will need more engines for this purpose in order to comply with their requirements for their capacity. That is why it is our joint task. I'd like to reiterate that we will be grateful to your partners for our joint work with the United Shipbuilding Corporation. There are some independent shipyards that are building those vessels. Probably there will be some projects that will have to be purchased. This is what we can do if we want to work with this large tonnage vessels. As for the second question, what are the requirements? We have Decree 719 with the system of certain points, and there are requirements to Russian equipment. And in the nearest future, we will not have the foreign equipment, and we will not be using these requirements for the interaction. We have mentioned that at other forums, also in the Far East, we cannot replace everything with our own Russian equipment or Russian products. It is physically impossible to substitute all of it for some positions, for some items. That's why we have to work on that together with our technological partners, first of all with the Chinese Republic, National Republic of China, for this area and for other sectors. I'd like to mention it once again that we will not be able to resolve this problem independently. So we will have to join our efforts with the United Shipbuilding Corporation and other stakeholders to find a solution. Thank you. And now we come to the issue of the new image of the fleet, and we are talking about the projects. And we have the founder from Nautic Cruise, Mr. Alfred Tulinius. They are already actively working in the Russian Federation, and they have come up with the new bow technology, and they are interacting with many companies. And let's talk about the future of the fleet. And I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Tulinius, please.
Does it work? Yes. Dear moderator, head of Rosribolovstvo, Mr. Ilya Shestakov, thank you for the invitation to speak in this distinguished panel. Fellow speakers, dear audience, Dobry den. I wish you all a good and fruitful fishery forum for the next 3 days. The questions asked here are big. and critical for the industry. I think I need to change my speech because I can see a great marketing opportunity by answering some of the questions by the Ministry of Industry. The Nautilus, a Russian-established company with a leading focus in fishing vessels, is basically ready not only to re-engineer all the projects you might have, but also to provide you with a modern, up-to-date project for the future. The questions asked are valid and good ones, and they are basically at the core of our business at Nautic. As designers, we are simply just one of the wheels in a larger mechanism with the responsibility of designing a vessel for a purpose. It's true that the fishing industry has liberated itself from an oppressive pre-definition of how a vessel should look. We at Nautic, we took that opportunity and introduced our trademark design, the Enduro bow, a capsule-shaped, inverted type of bow that only gives some positive benefits in multiple areas. We have received very good feedback from experienced captains on our design. The fishing industry is ever evolving with an increasing demand to its products. Foods will focus on customer convenience. Active pharmaceutical ingredients will be asked for, nutraceuticals, and cosmetic active ingredients. Cod skin, for example, is now processed in Iceland into a medical product as a protein grid with omega-3 fats for skin healing and diabetic patients and skin burns injuries. A product that represents even a greater value than the prime loin piece of the cod himself. Different types of fishing will call for a different approach. I split this into two groups: industrial deep-sea fishing and coastal and inshore fishing. The industrial deep-sea fishing in Russia will consolidate to even larger, stronger, and more vertically and horizontally integrated conglomerates. The high investment cost and the resource requirement to maintain a continuous unbroken chain from product development with value-added focus in multiple areas, harvesting the remotely located bioresources, the high-quality production with focus on customer convenience, product branding and marketing, logistics and transportation from vessel to distribution centers and onward. For the industrial deep-sea fisheries, this is inevitable, with increased focus on value-added production inside the Russian Federation. This part of the business, I expect, will develop into various types of combination of intermediate processing at sea that will ensure the best possible quality of the raw material for further value-added processing at a centralized location. The coastal and the inshore fisheries, I expect, will structure itself more based on fresh deliveries to an onshore centralized production facility. I would not be surprised if this segment of the industry will eventually formalize itself around a branded product, a business concept around the onshore-based centralized processing, distribution and service facilities that are strategically located around the Federation. Local fishermen have limited means and finances to renew their fleet, and I believe this segment of the business is a prime opportunity for a leasing concept that is built up around the brand. The fleet needed to feed the processing and the production can be leased to the local fishermen against a commitment to deliver a predefined quality raw material to the brand. This can be some sort of a cooperation or co-op or a simple business development for the communities around the Russian Federation to fuel advancement in this segment of the business in a socially responsible manner. The design of the vessels for this type of fishing can be standardized around the few types of vessel depending on the desired fishing techniques. Outfitting of the vessels should aim for a standardization with a similar installation in each type of vessel for a simplified local service aspect for the fleet. The coastal and inshore fisheries can also develop around the establishment of a fish auction markets, where the local processing plant can bid for a locally supplied raw material. But I suspect that development in this direction will not equally be focused on consistency and in the quality of the raw material, nor the standardization of the fleet. With the above mentioned, I think we will over time end up with what all was been asked for in terms of fishing fleet. A fleet of various types of vessels coexisting in harmony for a different purpose, except maybe for an unmanned subject in the nearest future. Of course, we are already automating and robotizing the most mundane of tasks, but that will call for a different, more technically skilled crew members, service and control of such automation. The common denominator for the industry will be advanced technology, automation in production to ensure consistency, fuel efficiency and alternative sources of fuel, high quality and consistency in product handling. Recent development in the world situation have revealed that the absolute necessity for Russian Federation to quickly develop the technical innovation and supply industry to support such transition of the fishing industry. Sadly, we have seen that normal international business ethics are easily and swiftly erupt in the support of geopolitical and currency-related agendas by our neighboring countries and key suppliers. Russia simply has to reinvent itself, take an active role in creating development and production of various solutions and equipment for outfitting our vessels and the industry. With the fishing industry developing rapidly, it calls for an integrated knowledge and strategical support to achieve its goals. This applies to three main segments: educational and scientific centers that focus on education and scientific development in all aspects of fishing industry; strategic reinvention of the shipbuilding industry with the sole focus on developing fishing vessels built and outfitting; strategic support for building up the technology-based manufacturing business and localize any kind of manufacturing of equipment needed to support the building and outfitting of our fishing vessels. Fishing industry knowledge clusters need to be established, strategically positioned in areas in the main industry, in the north, in the northwest, and far east. Such clusters should combine practical industry knowledge, scientific community, and business development, and form a strong educational background and research communities that are focused on practical opportunities and solutions for the industry. The main players of the industry should support such development actively to ensure an everlasting and rising learning curve in the business. This will eventually become a self-evolving breeding ground and spawn new startup ventures that eventually will gain participation of the players in the industry that will support the development they regard as a viable future business opportunity. Shipbuilding needs to be restructured from the current setup. Unfortunately, administrative limitations required by the Oyska yards do not facilitate necessary speed, the vigilance, dynamics in both building approach and integrated purchasing of supplies for the building. Quality of the works I've seen is good. But when it comes to equipment purchasing, outfitting supplies, subcontractor administration, and general understanding of the normal business practice, it's just not there. The solution can be established as a win-win situation, with current shipyards continuing building the hulls for our fleet with very limited outfitting responsibilities. Outfitting clusters to be established as a commercial entity for contract making of hulls, handle all dealings with ship owners, as well as purchasing and subcontractor management. This will ensure that the learning curve will be maintained at the outfitting cluster with more rapid upward trend than we currently have. We will experience the rapid development in some areas that are the focusing on making our fleet more efficient and smarter. Today, we are building highly advanced processing vessels that represent an investment in the range of $60 to $100 million or even higher. The proportional investment we make in the fish searching equipment for such an installation underneath these vessels is limited to 1 to 3% of the total investment value. In basic terms, we are giving our large investment a tunnel vision when it comes to finding our fish. We sail this investment to hopefully better harvesting grounds based on gut feeling of captains, his personal historical fishing logs, or position of the moon, tidal waters, currents, and information received for water temperatures and whatever we have historically used. The intent is not to downgrade the gut feeling of experienced captain, but literally broaden our vision when it comes to fish searching. With relatively limited investment compared to the investment in the vessel, or about $1 to $1.5 million, we can outfit the vessel with more search drones, or aquascouts, as I prefer to call them, that can have a scouting range up to 50 nautical miles, outfitted with modern searching equipment and remote controlled from the fishing vessel itself. With a point-to-point Wi-Fi connection to the fishing vessel, we can use these objects to scout for a better harvesting ground, while continue fishing at current location. Then, based on quantitative information gathered from the aquascouts, we can take an informed decision whether we should possibly relocate the fishing vessel for a better harvesting. Via satellite connection, the information can form a centralized company-wide database from multiple fishing vessels, each with their aquascout, for searching for for sharing a centralized information on prosperous fishing grounds. Everything today revolves around alternative and more eco-friendly fuels or energy sources. I must admit that my Russian part of my heart was somewhat disappointed when the industry announced recently that Russia will be starting to produce its own fuel combustion engine in near future. Okay, I say better late than never, but this should have happened years ago. Now it's more like an announcement that Russia is following in the already fading footsteps of our disappeared Western suppliers that are now heavily focused on alternative energies. I was honestly looking forward to an announcement that Russia would make a serious commitment to take a leading role in making a commercially available nuclear-based power unit to power our largest fleet. That would have made me seriously proud. I will continue to await such an announcement with excitement and hoping to see it in my lifetime. Thank you very much and have a good day.
I would like to thank Mr. Tulenius. Thank you very much. So I had a set of questions to ask you, but you have given answer to them all. We see what could be the prospects of the fleet, and Mr. Yevtukov enjoyed listening to you. I think when he's back to Moscow, he will discuss it with in the ministry that new propulsion engines should be developed. Okay, you are discussing it already. Good. I would like to thank Mr. Tulenius, and I would like to start our part of discussion on the finances. It is clear that the profitability in the industry is going down, the expenses are on the rise, and it is important to understand what is the state of the financial status of the industry. I would like to give floor to Yelena. Thank you, Ilya, and for the opportunity to have my talk. And indeed, the issue of financing the industry is important. There are two representatives of the financial sector. It is us and our colleagues from Sberbank. Rossельхозbank used to be a leader, and together with the Ministry of Agriculture, made a great contribution to the development of poultry industry and pig breeding industry. We export the products, and the vertically integrated holdings have been built in these segments to meet the internal demand, taking into account the demographic transformation in Russia. And that's how we view the fishing industry. And the colleagues have been stating that humanity consumes more protein and the population is growing. And as far as fish and aquaculture products are concerned, we expect that after the plateau of 2018, when we were fluctuating at the level of 20 kg per head, there will be a growth, and it will be 24 kg per capita by 2024. One of the drivers for this positive trend of aquatic food products is the development of aquaculture. We expect that some 20% out of the gain of 3 kgs will be supported by the development of aquaculture. It was mentioned today that currently there's a growing competition between the producers. All are fighting for their share at the shelves, and they're competing for their share in the stomach of the consumers. And we can see that aquaculture, as far as the growth rate is concerned, is only behind Turkey. And it accounts for 5% of the gain within the next 5 years. The growth rate of Turkey is only higher. So, talking about the scope of investments and which are necessary to support the growth, and the amount is 60 billion rubles till 2060, in conformity with the trends of the strategy of the Ministry of Agriculture. The investments into the industry, construction, infrastructure, and vessels is estimated at the level of 60 billion rubles. Our experience in all these segments of agriculture makes it possible for us to provide the industry and the stakeholders of the industry, aquaculture included, and we know it is mostly the small and medium enterprises. We can provide all the range of financial products. Aquaculture products strategy is built on the regional diversification. It should not be linked only, say, to the Far East or the basin of the northern seas, where the major facilities are concentrated. Aquaculture facilities, as a result of diversification in the region, will address the issue. We won't have a challenge. We won't have a challenge of logistics, of storing, because localization of the facilities will make it closer to the consumers. And we are thoroughly discussing the issue of construction of the fishing vessels, and this is not the problem in the aquaculture. They don't need ships. We are ready to contribute to the development of aquaculture. Big business are concentrating on salmon, and small business are primarily in the business of growing sturgeon, carp species, and all the segments of the business will be involved in the process. And the development of aquaculture is a part of the program. Subsidies are provided by the state, and it will provide an impetus for the support of the investments in this segment of aquaculture. Thank you. Thank you, Irina. Indeed, Rossельхозbank is a friendly bank for us, and the bank might be investing in has been investing in the fishing industry, but we believe your role in the aquaculture development will be growing. So that's what your intent is. So is that one of the roles? Yes, and the Ministry of Agriculture is controlling our KPI, investing into all the segments, and indeed we will be providing our investments in the amount of not less than 30% as far as aquaculture is concerned. Though aquaculture is development, but I think they need investments. The investments are lacking. They lack the special financing tools, and this business is a long-term bank, and it's good that Rossельхозbank will be focusing on the aquaculture. And if it is okay with you, we'll be oversighting it as well. By the way, we have started the construction of the forage producing facility, and the capacity will be even higher than was included into the initial business plan. I think that announcement is a present for the start of our fishery forum. Well, unfortunately, we will have to excuse two of our speakers. I would like to thank you for taking part in it. So, to continue discussion on the funding, there was a session at the Eastern Economic Forum, and I knew that Sberbank has a large share of the funding for the fishery industry, 70%. And I would like to listen to what is the state of the finances situation in the industry. Yes, we have been focusing on supporting the enterprises that do the catching, and it turned out that we fund 84% of the fishery complex in the Far East as well, and our portfolio is growing. It was 1 billion in 2018, 2019. Then it was growing, and now it is 4 billion. And you can imagine how many fishing entities and processing plants we have financed. But important is not only the dynamics, but the share at the market. We do have a lot to share, and the shipping enterprises are doing all right. When we started the work, the profitability in EBITDA was higher than the average figure for the agriculture industry, and our borrowers are more financially steady than the agro-industrial complex. We will keep funding it, both the fishery and aquaculture, and we will keep setting the ambitious goals. However, there is a lot of work to do in the future, not on the eve of the second stage of the investment quotas, but still to conclude the second stage. It will be $1 billion to finalize the work at the market, and we will have to address the issues together with the fishing companies and shipyards, and it's good that there is a dialogue between the two stakeholders. And of course, if you come to Sberbank to receive the bank guarantee for the failure of the shipyard to fulfill their obligation, of course, we will give you the money back, but there'll be no vessel for you. That's why dialogue is important on how to complete the current project and how to do the re-engineering on how to shift the schedule to the right, with the ultimate goal for you to receive the vessel. Talking about the financial situation at the market, I can say that starting from 2020, we've been engaged a lot in stress testing. We started with the pandemic situation when all the logistics chains have been erupted. And however, there was no catastrophe, and that's a good news. And all our stress tests, even the worst stress test, has indicated that the industry is quite resilient, quite viable. And our somber view on the recent situation, when the refinancing rate has grown, has soared to 120%. Still, it went down, and the funding, unfortunately, was done in the currency different from Russian rubles, and we will have to re-engineer it. We never reconsidered the frontal interest rates, irrespective of what the central bank was suggesting we should do, because we keep doing the long-term investment. Before it was 7-8 years. Now we are dealing with the financing period of 12 and 15 years, and we're switching to different currency. It's not only customary euro and USD. We provide funds in renminbi, in Chinese yuan. We have some transactions like that, and that's the focus of our activity. On the whole, the situation is not that bad, but taking into account the trends that I have mentioned, I can say that sooner or later we will need the state support for the project programs, and the support that is given by the Ministry of Agriculture to the husbandry and the agriculture should be enjoyed by the fishery and aquaculture. What's happening with the shipyards? The financial situation is not quite good, and even the batch vessels are not extra profitable contracts, and that's why the state support to the shipyards will be a must. And if it will be in the form of increasing the equity capital, the own capital of the shipyards, and the different forms for the other shipyards. And we, Sberbank, will be prepared to complete the funding of stage 1, and 80% of the 1 billion will be provided by Sberbank. So we are moderately optimistic with this situation. If I understand you right, you are talking about stage 2 of the investment quotas, and Sberbank will be prepared to provide funds for stage 2. It will be less, but quite big. Our stress tests have shown that we will be prepared to start stage 2 with the same ambition as stage 1. And of course, the loan capacity depends on the length of time. Loans for 5 years or loans for 10 years or for 15 years, and different interest rates and different volume. But we are capable of supporting the industry and ready to take part in stage 2 of the quota. Okay, let's talk about logistics and training. Even before the sanctions were imposed, there were certain constraints imposed by COVID-19 pandemic, and there were some challenges with providing products, supplying products to the Asian markets, China first of all. And it is important to talk now what are the prospects of supplying products to China. We have online speaker, representative, and the managing director of Beijing Sea Bridge Marketing and Consulting, Mr. Su Bing. The floor is yours.
Господин Фан Сюйбинь, вы нас слышите?
Mr. Su Bing, can you hear us? I would like to give floor to you.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, please. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I could start.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Mr. Su Bing.
Can you see the screen? Okay. So thank you, Mr. Ilya Shestakov. Thank you, the organizer of the Global Fisheries Forum. And today I'm going to talk about something about the global seafood consumption trend after the pandemic, and also talk about the pandemic, the impact on the global economy. Okay. First, I'm going to give you some brief conclusion we have drawn, and then I will talk about some of the details. We find that actually there are several aspects because of the pandemic. First is we find more consumers, they pay high attention on their own health and their family health. Secondly, we find that consumers has more time to stay at home and cooking for themselves and also for their families from home. Then we find that recently, since from 2022, the restaurant business has been gradually recovered. And number 4, we find the e-commerce sales developed very fast during the pandemic compared with before. Number 5 is we find the big income gap due to the pandemic, resulting more demanding on the low price seafood species. And the last one, the recent higher inflation rate make the seafood price getting higher. And also in the meanwhile, the weak economic together slow down the seafood consumption recovery, especially in 2022. That's the conclusion, and I'm going to give you some explanation. So first, look at this page. This one is a recent study done by the U.S. bank called the Goldman Sachs, and they studied the historical wars and the pandemic from 16th century to 20th century, and also the pandemic from 30th century to 19th century. And they find actually that historically, the average duration for the war is about 6.8 years, and average duration for a pandemic is about 5 years. So considering that COVID-19 is starting from early 2020, if the average duration is 5 years, we probably think that the pandemic could be fully, COVID-19 could be fully finished by 2024. Actually, yesterday, US President Biden has mentioned that the COVID-19 has officially finished in US, but in China, I think our government view the pandemic as a different thing. We haven't announced that the COVID-19 will be finished very soon, because nobody knows when the pandemic will fully finish in China. Here it's a very new market study by IPSOS about the different countries' views about the current economic situation. You will find actually averagely about 30%, 34% of the global consumers think that the current economy is good, and the 66 they say it's bad. And specifically, you find some countries like Saudi Arabia and India, they are much more optimistic than many other countries. And some countries like Peru, Argentina, Japan, South Africa, I think more than 90% or 80% of their people feel the economy is very bad for them. So different countries, they have different views on the current economy. This is a recent market study done by World Bank, and you could find actually, according to the estimation from World Bank, by 2023, the developed countries' economy might fully recover to level of 2019, but the developing countries, they are still struggling, especially for those least developing countries. This is U.S. consumers feeling about go outdoor to go to outdoor and enjoy the outdoor activities. You will find that the U.S. Consumers feels more and more comfortable with the time being, especially from 2022. But many other countries like European countries, and these countries, because of the releasement of the government control on the COVID-19, so more people are there to go outside and participate in the outside activities. They feel more comfortable. But if you ask the consumers from China, maybe their feeling is something different. Yeah. And we can find that the pandemic actually make the income and wealth between the poor and the rich people even bigger. Historically, the gap is not so big, especially in last century, in 1960s. Actually, the gap is going down. And before the starting of the pandemic, the gap between the rich and the poor, it's moderate. But we find that in 2021, the income gap has increased from 144 times to 224 times suddenly. So it's definitely because the pandemic to make the gap much bigger than before, and that will also very much influence the consumption of the consumers. From the poverty elevation point of view, the World Bank believes the poverty elevation will further developed with the time being, but the pandemic interrupted this process. So if you look at this figure, you will find actually from 2019 to 2020, the poverty number has suddenly increased. But fortunately, from 2021, we can see another dropping, which is going to the right track, I think. Yeah. And there is a recent consumer study done by EU Institute in middle of 2021. You can see that the pandemic's influence on the consumers in major EU countries is actually very massive. First, more people buy inexpensive food. They try non-branding, and they always check price before they go shopping. And the consumers, they spend much more time online, on the online food shopping, online food order, and home delivery. They buy in bulk and carefully plan the purchase in order to save money. So all these phenomena shows that the pandemic has greatly influenced the consumers' shopping pattern, mainly probably because the reduction of their income. Yeah. This page is very interesting because they show, according to that market study, it shows consumers during the pandemic, they eat more fruit, vegetables, crispy snacks, chocolate sweets, and they eat less convenience food and alcohols and beverages. For fish, I highlight here, you will see that consumers spending on fish products increase, it's just the moderate compared with fruits and vegetables. So this gives us a question, does the consumers really consider fish is a healthy food? If they consider fish is a healthy food, actually they should eat more like fruit and vegetables. And I think this is just moderate. So probably many of the consumers didn't treat fish as a healthy food. Yeah. Consumers spending more time on cooking, experience new recipes, and eat less ready foods. So all these come from that European Institute market research. But I think this kind of result might be similar for many other countries, including Russia and probably China. Yeah. The good news is we find actually from 2022, the business of the restaurant business has been quickly recovered. If you compare with this curve of 3 years, you will find 2020, the first quarter is a disaster. That's the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah. E-commerce is same. During the peak season of the pandemic, because people cannot go out, so you will find that actually more people are shopping online. That gives e-commerce a good opportunity. When the economy, when the pandemic is closing, it's dropping, situation are getting back better. You will find actually from end of 2021, there is a smaller number of people shopping online. So I think after the pandemic, I think the offline retail business will recover. Yeah. Now the recent issue, I think, is inflation. This curve, also from IPSS, you will find actually global society are concerned about some different things like employment, crime and violence, financial corruptions. But in the last 2 years, it's a very steep increasing worry about inflation. And at the same time, from February of 2022, the worries about COVID-19 is dropping very quickly. So now we can see globally, consumers are more concerned about inflation rather than the COVID-19. Lastly, I show you some of the global fish wholesale market dynamic. First one is fresh Atlantic salmon. You will find actually in the first quarter, like April, March, the wholesale market for fresh salmon going to the peak price level. Now the market has dropped to a reasonable level, about less than €6 per kilo. For Atlantic cod, the price is increasing, but not as fast as salmon. But in recent months, the Atlantic cod price increasing very fast. For frozen shrimp, the price is a little bit stable, but has not dropped. It still keep on the quite high level. Yeah. So this is the main part of my presentation, and Seabridge is a marketing company. We are helping different countries, trade associations and the government to do the marketing in China, include Norway, Canada, New Zealand, UK. And we are now in dialogue with some of the big Russian companies to try to promote the Russian king crab and snow crab in China. Yeah. So that's my presentation in context. And if there are any questions, I would like to answer here. Thank you.
Господин Фансюбин, вот спасибо большое.
Thank you very much for your presentation. But first of all, I'd like to ask you about the Chinese market. Chinese market is one of the most important for us export market. So what do you think about the Russian market and its interaction with the Chinese market, and specifically the crab segment, the crab delivery segment, and what is your opinion about that?
Hello? Hello?
Господин Фансюбин, вы мой вопрос услышали?
Mr. Van Zubin, have you heard my question? Sure. Okay.
Russia once been the largest seafood exporting country to China. But last year, I think Korean. Yes, I heard your question. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Идет задержка с сигналом.
Yes, there is a delay, but go ahead. We can hear you. Continue, please.
Has been the largest seafood export country to China. But last year, I think South Korea exceeds Russia, exceeds China, becomes the biggest seafood importer. And the reason behind, I think, is because last year, the pandemic in China situation is very serious. So our government said, okay. So our government set a very strict regulation on the Russian seafood import, especially the frozen seafood. We know that last year, the director bulk ship transportation from Russia to China has been stopped. A lot of frozen pollock and salmon was firstly shipped to Busan and repacked into containers then from Gushan, further shipped to Dalian. This year, from early February of this year, the government control has been released. So I think this year, the situation will be better than last year. For China, the Russian seafood, I can divide it into two groups. One is the frozen seafood, which is mainly the pollock and salmon. This product is mostly exported to China as raw material for processing and re-export. Another group we call the fresh and live products. That's mainly the live king crab and the snow crab. And compared with the frozen seafood import, the fresh and live seafood import does not affected by the COVID-19 control very much. So you find actually last year and this year, the Russian live king crab and snow crab export to China is going very well. But for the frozen Russian king crab, the sales is very slow. One reason is because of the government control. Another reason is because the Chinese consumers, they are not used to the frozen king crab. So I just mentioned our company is discussing with one of the biggest Russian king crab exporter. We are trying to help them to educate the Chinese consumers to use to eat more frozen crab from China.
Спасибо, господин Фан Сюйбин.
Thanks, Mr. Fan Sungbin. And we have still another speaker. It is Ms. Kadantsova, MD Inside, an official service partner of Alibaba, and of course the export of products of using international marketplaces is an interesting issue. I don't think many companies have faced it, have come across that kind of activity. So, do you think our industry could start exporting their products using international marketplaces? Where they are capable of, that's, I think, a question forwarded to the companies. And I would keep talking about the Chinese issue, and I was requested to talk about the importance of using digital services to find the end user. Since I represent Alibaba.com, it is B2B segment. We do not see the end users. It's only about the request of importing companies that are dealing with exporters. And talking about the importance of digital technologies, I can say that digital technologies at the moment when you open your account, you can see all the data. And if it is Alibaba.com, you can see the geography of not only the requests, but who has been checking your account and looking through your products. You can see how many seconds have been spent on each of your page. You can also monitor and track what competitors they have looked at. But it's better to see once than here. In Huanzhou, here is a special room, and you can enter this particular room. It's a dark room with a large screen. Of course, it is smaller than this magnificent screen, but over there you can see the data from all the Alibaba.com sites. You can see how many companies have registered, how many brands have been registered in the world, how many products have been sold at each site, to which countries. You can see all the transactions and banking operations. And for me, personally, the digital technologies, it is the power and scope of information that we saw at that particular moment in this dark room. Talking about the buyers, purchasers, and talking who they are and what the Chinese the customers from China like. And it's about these opportunities that we have. The food and drinks, the fish is included into the food and beverage, and it's growing. You can see the trend. And during the COVID pandemic, this group has become a leader at all these sites, because people staying at home, and they prefer food which is good for your health. And there is a great importance that is placed on the healthy products, but they have the so-called green products. It's slightly different from the Russian term. The Russian companies that are over there at this site, and 30% of them are from the category of food and beverage. And when we talk about the suppliers from Russia in the category of fish and seafood, we, from a category of big data, switch over to small data. And I have monitored manually the group of the suppliers, and there were 6 before, now there are 7, and I can give you the names. And if we have representatives, we can give them a big applause. It is Palmyra Trade House, Sharginskaya, individual entrepreneur, Samara SP, Mamona Canning Factory, and there are a few manufacturers that are included into the suppliers of the Primorsk region. If we compare the demand and supply, and if we look into the tender requests, we do not see the quotations, but we can monitor the tender sub-site of Alibaba.com. And over the past 30 days, there were 156 tenders invited for crab, and 330 tenders for the purchase of caviar. But the Russian companies most frequently do not get into the short list of the suppliers, because they either do not have the required capacity, and now we have quite a lot of technical requirements, and sometimes they don't even have the certificates. And to give support to the Russian manufacturers, the Alibaba.com site has launched a program. It is referred to as Export to China, and it is to give support to the global suppliers to promote their products at the Chinese market. It is a global program, and the products are selected that are most interested in for the Chinese customers. The program was launched in June, and we have sent the request to look to find such suppliers, and for the time being, we did not find the suppliers that are prepared to sell their products to China directly, where Alibaba.com will be the purchaser. and with all the guarantees provided. As of now, we have limits right now, and Alibaba is prepared to buy canned caviar, but there are some other categories that China is looking for in Russia. If you know such companies, or if you would like to take part, please get in touch with us and to make this a success story. And when working with these sites, I can see a contradiction. Almost all the major companies are saying they are interested to sell to China. But when we send requests to looking for the suppliers, we do not receive a feedback from those major companies. Different reasons. Some are saying we do not have a certificate for the time being, time is needed. The others are saying we focus on the Russian market. Some did try to work at Alibaba.com, and they know that the requirements and for the suppliers are very strict, and the volumes are high, and the Alibaba is interested to buy a large bulk, and the Russian companies are interested in a small bulk. But I would like to emphasize that the Russian manufacturers, producers should not miss the opportunity. I would like to have consultations and discussions and counseling on how to get to Alibaba, and Alibaba will be distributing your products at the Chinese market. I think you think about it and you dream about it, but not yet making use of it. The vacancy is open. Please join. To make a request to Alibaba, you can send the standard information about your company. You can get in touch with us as the representative of Alibaba, and we will send to the purchasing department of Alibaba.com for them to get in touch with you. The priority are the suppliers in the category of hot suppliers, because that's the Alibaba.com program. And but if you take part in the selection, you will be able to enjoy the subsidies to join the marketplace, and each country has got a quotas to make it to the Alibaba.com. We can consult you on how to use it. Annually, we bring in from 100 to 250 companies from Russia to join Alibaba.com. Even before, it was difficult for us to compete with the companies from Korea. And the situation, it is even more difficult to compete now. There are a number of reasons for that. One, it is the service component, and because it's a digital company, it is necessary to fill in all the information digitally, and the response time is very important. You know that the challenge of the Russian companies is of the logistics is taking too much time. If the calculation time is 1 day in China, it will take Russian companies to do the calculation within 3 days. Another component is marketing component, marketing kit. If you look at the image of the companies at this forum, everything is fine. Another thing, no problem with marketing kit. The budget for promotion is another thing, and there is a certain ratio of how much you spend on the services for promotion, and what's the budget for promotion. The commercial budget should be much more than the services for promotion, and the Russian companies are at the bottom of the list. The marketing budget of the foreign companies at the Alibaba.com is 3 times higher than that of the Russian companies, and that affects the results. And search filter monitoring. Large retailers make use a lot of filters, certificates as well. If you do not pass the filter, it will be difficult to find you. And then handling the business intelligence, and the third component is education component. A few years ago, I participated in the chamber and public chamber, and there are no specialists in Russia on e-commerce, and the specialists are not educated. They did not receive a respective education. It was a few years ago. The Ministry of Economic and Development took measures, and there was a decree to start educating students on digital e-commerce and the other things, but we cannot just wait till they will be ready. Between the 26th of September, 28th of September, the subsidiary of Alibaba engaged in education will have a special course on B2B marketing, especially for Russia. It is intended for Alibaba.com, how to promote products, how to succeed. And if you want your staff to take the course, and it is free of charge, you can get registered, and there will be an invitation link for you to join the course. Next. And the service partners of Alibaba.com will be working at the forum and exhibition for 3 days. You can get in touch with us. You can receive an industry report on your product. We can receive it in real time, and the staff can show you real time all the information available about your company at the Chinese market. And once again, if you're interested to get to take the training course, we can help you to get registered and join it. Thanks, Maria. Taking into account what suppliers have registered to Alibaba, and I didn't hear the names of any fish-producing companies that have registered over there. I would like to thank all the speakers for taking part at the plenary session. I would like to thank the speakers and their participants. I think the session has touched upon the agenda that is important for the industry on the whole and for Russia. So thanks a lot. This concludes the session. Thank you.